I am the only elf to ever escape the pits of Angband, and I wish I had died there instead. I have lived for 3,000 years since that escape, and not a day has passed when I did not think about going back. Not to free the others. They are beyond freeing. But to join them. To stop running from what I am becoming. Because I did not escape unchanged. I did not escape clean. Whatever Morgoth does to elves in those pits, whatever process transforms them into orcs, it had already begun in me. And it continues. Slowly. Inexorably. Every year I am a little less what I was, and a little more what they became. And I know, with absolute certainty, that one day the transformation will be complete, that I will become the thing I fled from. But I am telling you this now, while I still can, while I am still elf enough to speak coherently and remember what happened. Because someone must know. Someone must understand what Morgoth does in those pits, what it costs, and why no one who enters ever comes out the same. My name is Maeron. I was born in Beleriand, in the First Age, in the years before the sun. I was young when I was taken, barely 2 centuries old. I had been a scout for one of the Elvish kingdoms, ranging ahead of our forces during one of the many wars against Morgoth. And I was careless, overconfident. I ventured too far from my company, pursuing what I thought was a small band of orcs. It was a trap. They were bait, and when I followed them into the narrow canyon, the rocks above me came alive with enemies. Dozens of orcs, too many to fight. I tried to run, and made it perhaps 100 yards before something hit me from behind, and I went down. And when I woke, I was in chains, being dragged north, toward Angband. The journey took weeks. We traveled only at night, hiding during the day in caves, or under the cover of forests that had been corrupted by Morgoth's influence. There were perhaps 20 elves in our group, all captured the same way I had been. Some I knew by reputation, warriors, scouts. One was a craftsman from one of the great forges, all of us bound in iron chains that burned our skin where they touched. The orcs drove us hard, fed us barely enough to keep us walking, and they told us, in their harsh language, what awaited us at Angband. How we would be broken, how we would be changed, how we would become like them. And they laughed, because they had been elves once, and they knew what we were about to experience. We reached Angband on a night when the sky was dark and the air was thick with smoke from the forges. The fortress rose from the earth like a wound in the world. Black stone, twisted architecture, gates that seemed to exhale malice, and beneath it we could feel something vast and terrible, a presence that made the air hard to breathe and the ground feel unstable beneath our feet. Morgoth, the enemy, the Dark Lord who had shaped this place and filled it with his will. We were dragged through the gates and down through corridors carved from living rock, down through levels that descended deeper than any mine, down into the pits. The pits of Angband are not dungeons in the way other fortresses have dungeons. They are something worse. They are laboratories, workshops, places where Morgoth conducts his experiments in corruption. Each pit is a cell carved from stone, perhaps 10 feet on each side, with a single opening sealed by an iron door. Inside is darkness, absolute darkness. No light, no sound except what comes from within. And in each pit is an elf, or what remains of one. And Morgoth's servants work on them, methodically, patiently, breaking them down piece by piece until there is nothing left of what they were, and then rebuilding them into something new, something that serves the darkness. I was thrown into my pit on the first night. The door slammed shut behind me, and I was alone in the darkness. I could not see, could not tell how large the space was or if I was truly alone. I felt along the walls, found them rough, wet in places, cold, and I found something else. Chains, set into the walls at intervals, waiting. I did not touch them, did not want to know what they were for. I sat in the corner and I waited, and I listened, and I heard screaming from other pits, from all around me. Elves screaming, not in pain exactly, though there was pain, but in horror, in despair, in the sound of something fundamental breaking inside them. And I knew that soon I would be screaming too. They came for me on the second day. I do not know how I knew it was the second day. Time had no meaning in the darkness, but I had tried to count my breaths, tried to maintain some sense of the passing hours. And when the door opened, when torchlight flooded the pit and blinded me, I thought perhaps 2 days had passed. The guards were orcs. They dragged me out, chained my wrists, and they took me to a different chamber, larger, or lit by torches that burned with red flame. And there I met my torturer. He was not an orc, not entirely. He had been an elf once. I could see it in the shape of his face, in the remnants of features that had once been fair. But he had been changed, twisted. His skin was grey and rough, his eyes were yellow, his teeth were sharp, and he spoke in Sindarin, perfect Sindarin, the language of my people, used to break me. "I am Garthruin," he said. "I was like you once. I resisted. I thought I was strong. I thought I could endure. And I was wrong. You will be wrong too. But that is acceptable. Resistance makes the process more effective. The more you fight, the more complete the transformation will be when you finally break. So please, fight." The torture began simply. Pain. Pure pain. He had tools, blades, brands, things I cannot name, and he used them with expertise. Not to kill, not to maim permanently, but to cause maximum suffering without causing death. And he spoke while he worked. Told me about Morgoth, about the truth of the world, about how the Voller were tyrants who hoarded power and light, about how Morgoth was the only one who offered freedom, who told the truth, who gave his servants strength instead of lies. And I screamed, and I told him he was wrong, and he smiled, and continued. This went on for days, weeks. I lost count. Each day the same, dragged from my pit, tortured, lectured, returned to darkness, and slowly I began to break. Not because the pain was unbearable, though it was, but because of the isolation, the darkness, the constant assault on everything I believed. The voice of Garthruin, speaking in my own language, using arguments that almost made sense, twisting everything I had been taught until I could not remember why I believed it in the first place. And I began to doubt, began to wonder if he was right, if Morgoth was right, if the pain would stop if I just accepted it, just agreed, just surrendered. But I didn't surrender, not yet, because I met someone who reminded me why I had to resist. In the pits, sometimes they would move us, shuffle prisoners between cells, and one day I was moved to a different pit. And I was not alone. There was another elf there, a woman. Her name was Laurelyn. She had been there longer than I had, weeks longer, perhaps months, and she was further along in the breaking process. But she was still fighting, still refusing to give in. And we talked, in whispers in the darkness. And we reminded each other of what we were, of the light we had seen, of the world outside Angband, of the reasons to resist. Laurelyn told me things she had learned from others who had been in the pits longer. She said the transformation was not instant, that it took years, decades sometimes, that Morgoth was patient, that he wanted the corruption to be complete, to erase not just your will, but your memory, your identity, your soul. She said some elves broke quickly, accepted the lies and began to change within months, but others resisted for years, and those were the ones Morgoth prized most, because when they finally broke, when they finally became orcs, they were stronger, more capable, more useful. She said there were orcs in Angband who had been elves for thousands of years before their transformation was complete. And they were Morgoth's captains, his generals, his most trusted servants. And she told me about the stages. The physical changes came last. First came the mental breaking, the acceptance of Morgoth's lies, the rejection of the Valar, the embrace of darkness. Then came the moral breaking, the willingness to hurt others, to take pleasure in suffering, to become cruel. And only then, when the mind and soul were fully corrupted, did the body begin to change, the skin darkening, the features twisting, the teeth sharpening, the transformation into orc. And she said once it started, it could not be stopped, that even if you escaped, even if you fled Angband and returned to the light, the changes would continue. Slower, perhaps, but inevitable, because Morgoth's corruption was permanent, was written into your very essence, and could not be undone. I asked her why she told me this, why she did not just let me believe escape was possible, and she said, because I needed to know the truth, that if I ever had the chance to escape, I needed to understand what I would be carrying with me, what I would become, and I needed to decide if that was better or worse than staying in Angband and letting the transformation complete quickly. It was not a kind thing to tell me, but it was true, and I have thought about it every day since. Laurelyn and I were separated after perhaps a month. I was moved again, to a different pit, alone again, and the torture intensified. Garthruin began using different methods, not just pain, but deprivation, days without food, without water, until I was weak enough that standing required all my strength, and then he would offer me sustenance. But only if I repeated his words, only if I said that Morgoth was right, that the Valar were wrong, that I accepted the truth of darkness. And I was so hungry, so thirsty, so weak, that I almost did it, almost spoke the words just to make the pain stop. But I remembered Laurelyn, remembered her warning, and I refused. And then Garthruin tried something new. He brought me to a different chamber, and he showed me other elves, elves in various stages of transformation. Some still looked mostly elvish, but with skin that was beginning to grey, eyes that were beginning to yellow. Some were further along, hunched, twisted, their features barely recognizable as elvish anymore, and some were completely transformed, were orcs, but they remembered being elves, and Garthruin made them speak to me, made them tell me about their transformation, about how the pain had stopped when they accepted Morgoth, about how they were stronger now, freer now, better now. And I looked at them and I saw what I would become, and I wept. But I still refused, and I think that frustrated Garthruin, because after that, the torture became worse, more creative, more specifically designed to break me. He learned what I feared most and he used it. He learned what I valued most and he destroyed it. He took everything I was and he systematically dismantled it. And I felt myself fracturing, felt the edges of my identity beginning to dissolve, felt the lies starting to sound like truth. And I knew I was close to breaking, close to the point where I would say anything, do anything, just to make it stop. And then the War of Wrath came. I did not know it at the time. Did not know that the Valar had finally intervened, that they had come with all their power to destroy Morgoth and end his reign forever. All I knew was that one day the routine changed. The torture stopped, the guards stopped coming, and I could hear sounds from above. Sounds of battle, of stone breaking, of the mountain itself shaking, and I realized something was happening. Something big enough that even the pits of Angband were being affected. I do not know how long the chaos lasted. Days, weeks. But the guards did not return. Food and water stopped coming, and I realized that if I stayed in my pit, I would die there, either from starvation or from whatever was destroying Angband from above. So I tried the door, and I found it was not locked. The chaos above had been so complete that they had forgotten to secure the pits, or perhaps they simply did not care anymore. I pushed the door open, and I stepped out into the corridor. The corridor was empty, no guards, no orcs, just torches burning low and the sound of distant destruction. I could have gone back to my pit, could have waited to see what happened, but I knew this was my only chance, my only opportunity to escape. So I started walking. I did not know where I was going, did not know the layout of Angband, but I followed the sounds of battle, reasoned that if there was battle, there was a way out. And I walked. I found other prisoners, elves who had also realized their doors were unlocked. Some were recent captures, barely touched by the corruption. Others had been there longer, were already changing. We formed a group, perhaps 10 of us, and we moved together through the corridors of Angband, or trying to find a way up, a way out. And we encountered things. Orcs, yes, but they were fleeing too, running from whatever was happening above. And we encountered worse things, things that served Morgoth directly, creatures I cannot name. But they were distracted, focused on the battle above, and we slipped past them. We found stairs, leading up, and we climbed, floor by floor, level by level, and the destruction grew worse as we ascended. Walls were cracked, ceilings were collapsing, fire burned in some corridors, and we could hear it now, the sound of the Valar's wrath, the sound of Angband being torn apart from above. And we climbed faster, desperate, terrified that we would be trapped when the fortress finally fell. Laurelyn was there. I found her on one of the upper levels. She had escaped her pit too, was climbing with a different group. And when I saw her, I felt something break inside me in a different way. Not breaking toward darkness, but breaking toward hope. Because if she had made it this far, if we were both still alive, maybe we could make it out. Maybe we could survive this. We joined groups, climbed together. And for the first time in months, I felt something other than pain and despair. I felt hope. But hope is a dangerous thing in Angband. Because hope makes you careless, makes you believe things might work out. And we were not careful enough. We reached what we thought was the surface level, could see daylight ahead, could feel fresh air, and we ran for it, ran toward the light. And that is when they caught us. Not orcs, Balrogs, 2 of them, Morgoth's greatest servants, stationed at the gate. And they were not fleeing, were not distracted. They were defending, preventing prisoners from escaping even as the fortress fell around them, and they fell upon us with fire and shadow, and our group of 20 became 10 in seconds, became 5, became 3. Laurelyn was ahead of me, running for the gate, and the Balrog's whip caught her, wrapped around her waist, and the fire consumed her. She did not even have time to scream, just burned and fell and was gone, and I kept running, because stopping meant dying, and I had come too far to die now. I do not remember exactly how I got past the Balrogs. I remember fire. I remember shadow. I remember the smell of burning flesh. Some of it mine. I remember pain worse than anything Garthruin had done to me. And I remember stumbling, falling, crawling. And then I was outside, in the light, in the air. And Angband was behind me, collapsing, burning, being destroyed by the wrath of the Valar. And I was free. I did not stop crawling, did not stop moving, even though every part of me was burned and broken and screaming. I crawled away from Angband, away from the destruction, until I collapsed in a crater. And I lay there, and I waited to die. Because surely I was dying. Surely no one could survive what I had just been through. But I didn't die. Elves are resilient, and even burned and broken and corrupted, my body refused to give up. So I lay there, and eventually the sounds of destruction faded, and there was silence, and I was still alive. I was found by elves from the Valar's host 3 days later. They were searching the ruins for survivors, and they found me, barely conscious, covered in burns, and they took me to their healers. And the healers worked on me, healed my body as much as they could. But they could not heal everything, because some of my wounds were not physical. Some were deeper. And as I recovered, as the pain faded, and I could think clearly again, I realized something terrible. I could feel it. The corruption. It had begun in me. While I was in the pits, while Garthruin was breaking to me. The process had started, and even though I had escaped, even though I was free and in the light and being cared for by uncorrupted elves, the process was continuing. My skin was beginning to grey, just slightly, just at the edges. My eyes were changing, becoming more sensitive to light, less comfortable in brightness. My thoughts were darker, more violent. I would have flashes of anger, of cruelty, that were not natural to me, were not who I had been. And I knew what it meant, knew what Laurelyn had told me, that once the corruption started, it could not be stopped, only slowed, and that eventually, inevitably, I would become what I had fled from. I told the healers, told them what I was experiencing, and they examined me, and they confirmed it. The corruption had begun, was too far advanced to stop, and they gave me a choice. I could stay with them, live among the elves for as long as I remained recognizable, and when the transformation became too obvious, when I became too much like an orc, they would send me away. Or I could leave now, go somewhere alone, live out the rest of my transformation in isolation. So I would not hurt anyone, so I would not spread the corruption. I chose to leave. I could not bear the thought of staying among my people, watching them look at me with pity and fear, watching them wonder when I would fully change, when I would become dangerous. So I left, went to the wild places, the forests and mountains far from civilization, and I have lived there ever since, alone, watching myself slowly change, slowly become the thing I escaped from. It has been 3,000 years, and the transformation is not complete. It is much slower than it would have been in Angband, because I am not being actively tortured, not being actively broken, but it continues. My skin is darker now, rougher. My teeth are sharper. My hands are becoming clawed, and my thoughts are darker still. I have violent urges that I must constantly suppress, cruel impulses that are not mine, or rather, that are mine now, that are part of what I am becoming. And I know that one day, or the elf will be gone completely, and only the orc will remain. And I will not even remember writing this, will not remember being Maeron, will just be another servant of darkness, even though Morgoth is gone. Even though there is no master to serve, the corruption will complete itself, because that is what it does. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. You are hearing the confession of someone who escaped the worst place in Middle-earth, who survived what shouldn't be survivable, but who didn't escape unchanged. If you want to hear more stories like this, more voices from those who survived darkness but carry its marks, then stay. Listen. Subscribe to Whispers from the Shire. Because there are more survivors out there. More people who escaped but didn't escape clean, and their stories deserve to be told. Thank you. I think about Laurelyn often, about how she was so close to freedom, how she ran toward the light and was burned just before reaching it. And I wonder if she was the lucky one, if dying clean, dying as an elf, was better than what I chose, better than surviving as something in between, something that is neither elf nor orc, but trapped in the slow transition from one to the other. She died herself. I am dying by degrees, losing myself piece by piece, and I cannot stop it, cannot even slow it significantly. Just watch as it happens. I have tried to resist the corruption, tried to hold on to what I was. I avoid violence, avoid cruelty. I help when I can. Save travelers who get lost in the wild. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. Trying to prove that I am still good, still elvish, still worthy of the light. But the urges grow stronger, the dark thoughts more frequent, and I know that one day, helping people will not satisfy me anymore. One day, the urge to hurt will overwhelm the urge to help, and on that day, I will know that the transformation is complete, that Maeron is gone, that only the orc remains. I have thought about ending it myself, about walking into the sea, about finding some way to die while I am still mostly myself. But I am a coward. I cannot do it, cannot take that final step. So I continue, day by day, year by year, watching myself fade, watching the corruption spread, hoping that when the end comes, when I finally lose the last pieces of myself, it will be quick, that I will not be aware of what I have become, that I will not remember being elf. But I think I will remember. I think that is part of Morgoth's design, that even when the transformation is complete, even when you are fully orc, there is something buried deep inside that remembers what you were, that remembers the light, that remembers being loved and being whole. And that memory is torture, because you cannot reach it, cannot reclaim it, can only remember that it existed and know that it is gone forever. That is the true cruelty of what Morgoth does, not just transforming elves into orcs, but making sure they remember, making sure they know what they have lost, making sure the suffering continues even after the transformation is complete. I am the only elf to ever escape the pits of Angband, and I carry the knowledge of what happens in those pits, of how Morgoth breaks elves, of the stages of corruption, of the inevitability of the transformation once it begins. And I am telling you this for a reason, not for pity, not for help. There is no help for me. The corruption cannot be undone. But I am telling you so, you understand. So you know what orcs are, what they were before they became what they are. Every orc you see, every twisted, cruel, violent creature serving darkness, was an elf once, was captured, was tortured, was broken over years or decades or centuries until there was nothing left of what they were. And then they were rebuilt into something new, something that serves evil because that is all they know, all they can be. and they remember. Somewhere deep inside, they remember being beautiful, being whole, being loved, and they hate you for reminding them of what they lost, hate you for being what they can never be again. That is why they are so cruel, not because cruelty is their nature, but because cruelty is all they have left, all Morgoth left them with when he took everything else. I tell you this because someone must know, because the pits of Angband are gone, destroyed in the War of Wrath. But the knowledge of what happened there should not be lost, should not be forgotten. Because Morgoth is gone, but his corruption remains, in every orc that still walks Middle-earth, in every twisted creature that serves darkness, and in me, the last survivor of the pits, the only one who escaped and can still speak, still remember, still tell the truth about what happened in that terrible place. I do not know how much longer I have, how much longer before the corruption completes and I lose the ability to speak coherently, to think clearly, to remember who I was. But while I can, while I am still Maeron, I am telling this story, recording it, leaving it for whoever finds it. So someone knows, so someone understands, so the truth is not lost. The pits of Angband were worse than death, were worse than any torture you can imagine, because death ends, torture ends. But what Morgoth did was eternal, was a transformation that continued even after escape, even after freedom, even after 3,000 years. And I am proof of that. I am the evidence that you cannot escape Angband unchanged, that once the corruption begins, it never stops, only slows, and that even in victory, even in the destruction of Morgoth and the breaking of his power, some of his evil endures, in the orcs that remain, and in me. I escaped the pits of Angband, but I did not escape what was done to me there. I carry it with me, will carry it until the day I fully become what they tried to make me. And on that day, when the last piece of Maeron is gone and only the orc remains, there will be no one left who remembers the pits from the inside. No one who can tell the truth about what happened there. So I am telling you now, while I still can, while I am still enough of myself to speak, to remember, to warn you. Do not pity the orcs, but do not think them simply evil. They were made, broken and remade by a power so terrible that even the Valar feared to face it for ages. They were elves once, beautiful and whole and full of light, and that was taken from them, piece by piece, year by year, until nothing remained but the twisted shells you see now. And they remember. They remember what was done to them, what they lost, what they can never reclaim. And that memory drives them to cruelty, to hatred, to the service of darkness. Because darkness is all they have left. I am Maeron. I am an elf. I escaped the pits of Angband, and I wish I had died there. Because living with this corruption, watching it spread, knowing what I am becoming, is worse than anything they did to me in those pits. Worse than the torture. Worse than the darkness. Worse than the lies. Because at least in the pits, I could hope. Could believe that escape was possible. Could fight against what they were trying to do to me. But now, there is no fighting, no resistance, just the slow, inevitable transformation, and the knowledge that when it is complete, everything I was will be gone, and only the monster will remain. That is what it means to escape the pits of Angband. Not freedom, not victory, just a slower path to the same destination. And I have walked that path for 3,000 years, and I will walk it until there is nothing left of me to walk, until the corruption is complete, until Maeron is gone forever. And only then will I truly understand what Morgoth created in those pits. What he did to the elves he captured, what he turned them into. Because I will be one of them, will be an orc, will be the thing I escaped from, and there will be no one left to remember that I was ever anything else.